And what a beautiful day! Now we're going to a place, Mdina, which is called the Silent City. It's in the middle of Malta. It used to be the only fortress and at one point was the capital of the country. Why is it called the Silent City? I don't know. Let's go and find out. Welcome to Mdina, or the Silent City. But why is it called the Silent City? Well, I did a little bit of research, asked around, and it seems there is no one answer to this. Nobody seems to be certain as to why it's called the Silent City. So, as we wander around and I show you the views, I thought I can tell you a bit about the history about Mdina, because it's fascinating, and the different theories as to why it is now called or known as the Silent City. So, starting off, Mdina is a remarkable walled fortress right in the centre of the island of Malta. It has a long and fascinating history. It was originally founded by the Phoenicians over 2,000 years ago in the 8th century BC, and it was then called Malath. The next major event in the history of Mdina was when the governor of the city, it was called Publius, was standing on the walls overlooking, because you get fantastic views over the city, over the island, which is why it's such a strategic spot. And he was looking out over the bay during a storm and he saw a shipwreck. And it was the shipwreck of the Apostle Paul. Now he rescued the Apostle Paul, took him in, and the Apostle Paul then converted him to Christianity and healed his father of sickness. Now this started the spread of Christianity over the island of Malta, and it is still predominantly a Christian island. And Publius became the first bishop of Malta, and the bay where St Paul was shipwrecked is now called St Paul's Bay, and the cathedral, which was originally built there and been rebuilt many times through history, is still St Paul's Cathedral in the city of Mdina. By the year 218 BC, the Roman Empire arrived in Malta and took over the city. They expanded the defences to 3 times its size. They really built it up, and they called the city, was then called Malta. Malta became a very strategic centre for the shipping lanes around the Mediterranean, and they built lots of temples and things in and around Mdina. But as the Roman Empire crumbled and fell, so did the Roman buildings. Now very little is left nowadays of any of the remains of the Romans being there. It's been built over year after year. There's a few things here and there, but mostly it's gone. After the Roman Empire fell, the new order came in, this time the Byzantine Empire. Now they actually reduced the size of the city that the Romans had built up to make it more defendable, because they were worried about the next set of invaders and attackers, this time the Arabs. Now Melite, as it was known then, withstood several assaults from Arab attackers and pirates until the siege of 870 AD, where after a 7-month siege of the city, it fell, and the inhabitants were massacred. The city was destroyed and the church was looted. The city then remained largely uninhabited for many years, giving rise to the first theory on why it's called the Silent City. A once proud and busy city reduced to rubble and ruin. Over 100 years later, a group of Muslim traders with their slaves built a new settlement on the site of the old city and called it the name we know today, Mdina. But it didn't take long before they were settled before the Byzantine Empire came back, and then a year-long siege took place. Fortunately for the people of Mdina, they held out, the Byzantine Empire withdrew, and peace returned to Mdina, but only for a short while. In 1091, Roger of Sicily, a Norman who had conquered Sicily, sailed across to Malta with an army to conquer Malta in order to fortify it and use it as a defence against raiding parties of Arabs and North Africans who were coming across to Sicily, like a defence platform. Now, upon landing in Malta, he was met with little opposition, and the rulers in Mdina agreed that the island would become a tributary of Sicily while continuing to administer itself. So a sort of an early agreement of, we won't fight with each other, and but we'll send you money. Now, some people say that to cement this agreement, Sir Roger cut off a piece of his banner to raise as a flag over the city of Mdina, and this is how the Maltese got their red and white flag. Again, nobody can actually confirm as to whether that's actually true or not, but it sounds a nice story, hey? Over the next 300 years, the city was actually outgrown by the nearby settlement of Rabat. Being a walled city, there's not much room for expansion or growth inside it. So a lot of the nobles and the rich people and the soldiers remained in the fort, and the nearby city grew. But the whole area of Malta and Mdina suffered various attacks from Arabs, Saracens, Moors and pirates. They fended off most successfully. That's one of the advantages of being a walled city with just one entrance and on top of a hill. If they saw the enemy coming, because they had good viewpoints, because you can see so far in all directions, you can see an approaching army, they could hole up in the city and wait for them to retreat. But one particular pirate attack gave rise to the second theory of why it's called the Silent City. It was around the year 1429 when a large pirate force sailed around Malta, attempting to attack the various ports. It was looking for a headquarters to base itself in the Mediterranean. They attacked the various settlements around the coast, and they were repelled from most of them. Finally, they retreated into St. Paul's Bay and found an unopposed landing. They then marched onto Mdina and besieged it. Now, at this time there was about 700 people living in the city, and after a brief siege the pirates took over the city and moved in, and for the next 20 or so years they used it as their official pirate capital while they sent out raids into the Mediterranean. Then one day they were gone. Not just the pirates, but all the original inhabitants of the city. The city stood empty and silent, and nobody and nothing in history accounts for what happened. The pirate ships were gone, the pirates were gone, all the original inhabitants were gone. Nobody knows. So again, the name, the Silent City. Now, understandably, after this, people were reluctant to move back into the city. It isn't really having a good track record at this point. But several of the noble families from the surrounding cities moved into the city and started building it up again. Building up the fortifications. It was, after all, the most strategic place, and it still was the capital of Malta. The Order of St. John took over Malta in 1530. The nobles of Mdina ceremoniously handed over the keys of the city to the Grand Master so he could continue to rule Malta from Mdina, the capital. But he chose differently, and Mdina lost its capital status. Instead, the knights opted to remain closer to the coast in the cities of Burgo and Senglia, which they built up into bigger fortifications. They did also upgrade the fortifications of Mdina and rebuilt the cathedral there. Now, the new fortifications of Mdina and the other cities of Malta were soon put to a test. In 1565, during the Great Siege of Malta, when the Ottoman Empire landed on the island, and the Knights of the Order barricaded themselves into their city strongholds. Well prepared and well defended, they not only successfully repelled the Ottoman attacks, but the cavalry that was based at Mdina regularly made sorties out of the city to harass and raid the Ottoman camps and supply routes, thwarting the invaders' attempts to gain a foothold on the island. After a 6-month siege and many battles, the Turks were defeated. When the Great Relief, a force of 8,000 soldiers, arrived on Malta from the island of Sicily. The effect of the Ottoman Empire's defeat on Malta had a profound effect on history, as the kings of Europe united to push back at the previously undefeatable Ottomans and signal a demise of the Ottoman Empire. In the following years, Mdina underwent renovation and improvement to its fortifications and buildings, and a strong Baroque influence was introduced to the city by one of the architects, and a new entrance gate was constructed. It's the entrance gate we walk through today as we go into the city. History rolled on, and in 1798 a new force captured the city. This time it was the French under the Emperor Napoleon, and he garrisoned 65 soldiers in the fort at Medina. Now in September the same year, the Maltese uprising broke out, and in September of that year a group of rebels snuck into the city at night and massacred the French garrison. In the morning there was none of the usual noise as the soldiers went about their daily business, just an eerie silence, leading to yet another theory for the name the Silent City. It was in fact the last battle that Mdina saw, as the French surrendered in 1800 and Malta became a British protectorate. Today, Mdina is a major tourist attraction and well worth the visit. The narrow winding streets that in the past saw knights on horses riding through are now restricted to just a few vehicles for the some 300 residents who live there. To visit, you must either walk or take a horse and carriage. Now this has given rise to the final theory as to why it's called the Silent City. The fact that there is so little traffic allowed in keeps the streets quiet and silent. Some locals will also tell you not to make noise if you walk the historic cobbled streets at night, lest you wake the spirits of the long dead.